Hey, good evening, everyone. It is so good to see you once again, and welcome to Sandwich Generation. This is part four of a hmm, don't know how many part series, but we're just going to keep this Sandwich Generation going for as long as we can. So, my name is Connie Pizarro, and I am the owner of Oasis Senior Advisors, and I am one third of the Sandwich Generation team here. Oasis Senior Advisors is a franchise, and what we do is we help seniors and their families to find assisted living and memory care communities when being at home is no longer safe for them. Additionally, we connect families to resources that they might find to be helpful along their senior care journey. So I have been in the business now for 11 years. I'm a certified senior advisor. I'm also a certified dementia practitioner. Um, as you will see here this evening, we have various topics that we will be bringing to you from time to time. I believe we're going to take a break in the summer, but we will have another presentation for you in June. So right now, what I'd like to do is introduce you to the second part of our Sandwich Generation team, Megan Scott, who is the owner of Right at Home.
Thank you, Connie. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As Connie mentioned, my name is Megan Scott, and I am the owner and operator of Right at Home of Essex County. We provide in-home care to seniors and adults in all of Essex County, and we've actually been family owned and operated out of West Orange for over 22 years now. As Connie mentioned, we started the series to really speak to the sandwich generation and help provide as much information and as many resources as possible. This is a part four of the series, and we do plan to continue over time because we know how overwhelming, this time in life can really be. So, we appreciate all the feedback we've gotten so far, and, we're excited to continue sharing with all of you. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Tez, who is our featured presenter for tonight. Tez Roro is a real estate broker, educator, and community leader who specializes in helping families navigate major housing transitions with clarity and confidence. With a background in corporate leadership and years of experience guiding buyers, sellers, and families through complex decisions, she is known for her education-first approach and her ability to simplify what can often feel overwhelming. As a senior real estate specialist and licensed real estate instructor, Tez frequently leads workshops focused on helping sandwich generation support aging parents while balancing their own busy lives. Her work focuses not just on real estate decisions, but on the emotional, financial, and practical planning that families often wish they had started earlier. Today, she'll be sharing practical insights and a roadmap to help families make informed, thoughtful decisions about downsizing and next chapter housing transitions. Thanks, Taz.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm sure some more folks will trickle in as we go along, but we'll get started for now. As Megan mentioned, the three of us, Connie, myself, and Megan, call ourselves the Care Collective, and we've been offering these virtual workshops for several months. And we actually had an in-person panel as well last year that was well attended, and we felt like each of the topics deserved individual attention. So we're here today. So my name is Tez. As mentioned, I'm the broker owner of Utopia Realty Partners. And today we're going to talk about, this just says I'm a nerd, y'all. I stay in the classroom. I'm either teaching or taking classes, okay? What you need to know here is this SRE, a Certified Senior Real Estate Specialist, which is relevant for the topic today. What I can promise you is this is not going to be a sales pitch. I'm not going to sell to you, let you know how great I am or you should work with me. This is honestly, which all of our sessions have been, is going to be packed with information that's going to help you make informed decisions as you help your navigate this sandwich generation season of life, right? Helping your elderly parents or family members. So session one, we talked about how we got here to this session is estate elder care legal planning, right? Putting the documents in place because that's important, and all of us should have that, regardless of how old we are. And then, when loved ones need care, sometimes we don't want to put them, in a place, and we may want to help. Them in their home. And so we had a home care session led by Megan. And then sometimes the help at home is not enough, right? They just need to be in assisted living. And we had Connie lead that session for us. If you've missed any of it, don't worry. We have it recorded. We can send it to you. And then at some point, you may realize that, okay, it's time to downsize or perhaps get rid of the family home. And there is a lot that is to unpack there, right? It's not just selling a house, it's a lot of emotional considerations. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, is to be your thinking partner in that journey and give you things to consider, to do, to plan, so that you can have that conversation. We'll help you come up with some approaches to even having that conversation, because it's hard to do so, and then getting alignment with your family members. And then next time we will have navigating the emotional side of caregiving, because we know it's emotionally taxing, right? So then why families usually think about downsizing. And I'd love for folks who are here today to just maybe chat and let me know where you're logging in from, because I know that we encouraged even siblings, right? Even though they're not necessarily in New Jersey, to attend, because we understand alignment is important. And also, when you saw the title, what spoke to you? Like, what were you hoping to hear about? Just chat in the comment. Generally, a lot of the times people think about downsizing. If we look at this from a lens of the older adult or senior homeowner, is the house just feels big, right? The kids are grown and they're out, and maintenance is getting harder. The lawn, the snow, and maintenance in general, affordability tax, maybe property taxes have gone up, right? And folks are living on limited income, particularly if they're retired. We know that Social Security is nothing to live on. And in fact, in the next 10 years, it's expected to go down, right? What folks can expect to get monthly. Safety concerns. Maybe you've noticed, I know that in our district, we just came back from spring break. Usually family visit their loved ones during spring break. And usually if you don't see your family, if they're not close by, and you see them months later or a year or so later, you do notice some changes, right? Maybe the way they walk or how careful they are. Perhaps there's a fall. Maybe they don't feel comfortable going to the bathroom. All these things come up. Isolation concerns. Usually, the sandwich generation, right, the adult children may move for work or school or whatever it may be, and our loved ones are not around us, and so therefore there's some isolation that can happen, and then that leads to us managing two households, right? We have our own households and our kids and our pets, and we're already stretched thin, and now we're worrying about when it snows, is the snow clear? Are they going to fall? I know in my town, there's social media posts going on. I need help, clearing out my mom or dad and things like that, right? And it's a lot emotionally to manage those. And of course, we feel stretched thin as well. I do see a few things on the chat. Let me see. Yes, financial strain caring for parents. Exactly. And if there's questions that come up for you guys, feel free to drop it in the chat. We will monitor it. And if it makes sense, I'll answer it as I go along. If not, we'll definitely have time for a Q&A at the end. So does this resonate? Does any of this resonate? Let me know in the chat. This workshop is for you. If you're helping aging parents, if you're the only child, or maybe you feel like the only child, right? We know that there's different dynamics in every family, and typically the elder one, or there's just one that feels a sense of responsibility when everyone else is living their merry, unbothered life, right? Maybe there's disagreement between your siblings in terms of, how mom and dad or auntie should be managed. And parents saying, I'm not ready. That's the hardest part, is you noticing some changes, but them feeling like they're not ready. And we'll help you come up with some conversation starters for that as well. And then you're feeling overwhelmed. Y'all, we are already busy, stretched thin, right? We're supposed to keep up with our vitamins and, working out and not drop a ball when it comes to these kids' deadlines. And it's a lot. And now we're having to manage um, another generation, which they deserve, right? They paid sacrifices for us, but it is a lot. And so ideally, we want to plan before crisis happens, right? Yes, Shanita, I hear you. Only child of a widowed only child. Ooh, that's a lot. It's a lot. So what can we do to kind of lessen that burden? Getting rid of stuff. Yes. The guilt associated with it. We'll talk about that as well. So what makes downsizing different? I say downsizing intentionally, not selling, because when you're dealing with a family home that's been in the family for decades, you're not just upsizing, downsizing because you want to. Usually it's because you have to, right? Maybe to help with assisted living, or it's just not safe anymore. So there's logistical issues. If you're not living close by, even more so, right? Even if you are, it's a lot to manage. The emotional bandwidth and consideration, and of course the financial, right? When it comes to maintaining the home, but also what's next for mom, dad, auntie next time. So if any one of these things are not cared for, we will pay for it down the line some way, somehow. It could be relationships, it could be money, it could be our health. We will pay for it down the line. And so the goal is, what can we do now before crisis happens to prepare? So I'm going to introduce you to the care plan framework. Makes sense because we're the care collective, right? So we're going to talk about clarifying the reality. We're going to talk about aligning family members, which is one of the most challenging things in this dynamic. We're going to review options. There are options, and it's helpful to know what those options are earlier on. And then we're going to execute with support. Okay. So clarify reality. The reality is that do we feel like the home is still safe for them, right? When you make those visits, is it still okay to walk around? Do you have concerns about them falling or forgetting, medicine or opening mail, things like that, right? There's certain things that we talked about when Connie and Megan mentioned. I believe they're called ADLs, activities of daily living, things that are kind of telltale sign that mom and dad may need help, right? They may not know it, or they may know it and not be able to accept it. But kind of looking out for those signs. Is maintenance realistic of the home, right? Both financially and just logistically, are finances manageable? Again, we talked about rising taxes and just cost of living in general. Is isolation increasing? Is help already needed? And sometimes isolation can also come from, I've learned recently, maybe hearing loss as well, right? If you're not close with them in person, you may not notice. And the shame from kind of repeating things usually tends to lead in isolation, unfortunately. So it's not that the parents don't want to move. They fear losing independence. So the boomer generation puts a lot of pride in accomplishments. They worked hard, they own their home, they're very attached to the material things, right? I bet a lot of our parents may have a lot of things that they find hard to let go. It's because they put value in those things. It's not so much the materialistic mindset that a lot of us may have in the current generation. It's more so, I worked hard and I got this, and every letter, every postcard, every picture, it means something to them. Right? Someone already mentioned the children feeling guilt. There's identity tied to a home. There's identity tied to jobs and titles, even for us, right? And decision exhaustion. It's a lot. I mean, one of the number one reasons that folks are not moving who know well and good that they have outgrown the space, it is too much to manage, they do not want to pay the taxes, is actually like, where do I start? It's a lot. I've lived here for generations and for decades, and where do I even begin? Right? It's a lot. And then, some of us are just avoidant, have avoidant personalities, don't want to deal with decisions or, attacking those kind of tough conversations head on. So people don't resist moving, they resist losing control. People don't resist moving, they resist losing control. So what do we do with that information? How do we start the conversation? So now we get to the A, which is aligning the family, right? So most stress comes from misalignment, as you may imagine. It happens in our little nuclear family, right? Yeah. Short dress that we had to find and seek out our dad's guns. Yeah. Um, so here are the common issues that I see when I'm helping and representing sandwich generations. There are different priorities and value systems for the adult children and also the parents, right? Usually what I see is depending on who's the responsible one and who's just riding off of everybody's time and attention, is somebody might just want speed. They don't really have the time to deal with decluttering and figuring things out. They just want it done, right? Which is fine. There might be a case where that makes sense. But the other person may say, no, we're willing to, pull up our sleeves and do the work and actually, get the maximum price. This is, after discussions have happened and perhaps, the family has decided it is time to sell the home. Again, some of us avoid decisions, right? It could be making that appointment with a professional. Yes. Okay. Um, and the parents feeling pressured. So this is a really tough one because we know at some point that it's no longer safe for them to live there, but because of the value they attach to the home and the pride and the sense of belonging and losing control of a familiar environment, they feel like they're being pressured to make that change, right? So how do we start the conversation? What we don't say is, hey, Ma, you can't live here anymore. It's not safe, right? Because that's going to get their guards up right away. None of us want to hear that. Um, what we can say is, say you get a call, asking you for help with this or that is, kind of leaning into that conversation with a sense of grace and understanding is, what would make life easier right now? Or, what would life would look like ideally? Does it look like not having to care for the lawn or worrying about cleaning the snow or kind of get them to think about what that lifestyle looks like? So they can start to at least emotionally detach a little bit from that specific home, right? It could also mean maybe moving closer to their grandchild. I know that's a soft spot for a lot of grandparents. Um, what worries you, right? So kind of thinking about these conversations and not coming from a combative, like it's not safe for you anymore, because again, that speaks to that sense of independence and control that all of us would want to have. So what are the options, right? Once we decide that perhaps home is not safe anymore, what are the options? And again, Connie's session does an amazing job of digging deep into each of these, and I encourage you to watch that. But for this session, I will let you know that sometimes, a financial makes sense, right? Like it's okay to pay the taxes or the mortgage if they still have it and the maintenance. Like if finances is not an issue and they're fairly healthy, perhaps you could age in place. And what that means is there's some modifications that you could do to the home. You may see in some homes there is handicap rails, right? Sometimes the bathrooms get adjusted with the handler, in the kitchen. There's things that could be done in each room to make it a little bit safer so that they don't fall or, it's more safe. Sometimes it means moving closer to their support system, but still living independently. It doesn't necessarily mean assisted living or anything like that. It just means closer so your heart can settle, right? A lot of that is the number one reason, by the way, why people move across all generations to be closer to their support system. It could be the sandwich generation getting closer to their parents so they can get help with their kids. It could be vice versa, right? The grandparents wanting to be closer to their grandchildren, also supporting their kids if they're physically able to do so. And I think it also gives us a sense of peace. My mom luckily lives a block away from me, and whenever it snows, my kids go and clean her car, and it's just, I still worry though, right? Like even though she's close, it's like I wonder if she's gonna walk and fall or, because of the snow. Like the worry doesn't stop, but at least you feel a little bit more in control that you can be there. Senior community. So this can mean a range of different things. It could mean still independent living. There are homes that are 55 and over, right? That are individually owned, just like a condo or townhome, where they have similar age people. So, socially, generationally, they're sort of in the same space. So it cares for that isolation that we talked about. And of course, we have assisted living as well, depending on the type of help that they need. Someone called me the other day and they said, hey, I'm selling my house because we bought a home, a multi-generational home where, three generations are going to live together. Sometimes that makes sense too. Um, it could be renting as well, right? ADUs are accessory dwelling units. Um, it's an ordinance. Different towns have different ordinances for this. A town like Montclair, and I believe South Orange and Maplewood already have this ordinance in place where if someone wanted to build an ADU or an accessory dwelling unit, essentially a separate, smaller home on the same parcel or lot, they could do that. So that could be another way as well, right? Um, I understand that the governor, the current and the past in New Jersey at least, had an interest in advocating for this to be more of like a blanket New Jersey ordinance so that it can help solve for the housing shortage that we have, right? So if you all are not aware, we are in a housing shortage, and we don't have enough homes for the buyers that are out there, and this can potentially help solve and alleviate some of that. And then, hey, you might decide, okay, mom or dad don't need to be in the home anymore, but maybe we don't sell it. Maybe we keep it as an investment property. Which is fine, but that does have a whole other set of considerations, right? You have to be knowledgeable about landlord-tenant laws and fair housing and discrimination and security deposit laws. Like there's a whole host of things that you have to be responsible for. Sometimes people choose to outsource that piece of it through property management services, which we happen to offer. So there are ways if you want to keep the home, to do that as well. And this is why it's helpful to know all the options, um, and consider them, before you're sort of cornered. Now, if selling becomes part of the plan and the family has decided, it's usually not the first decision. Like you see all the considerations that we went through. You may have to find a place for mom and dad, whether it's assisted living or not. And consider going through, okay, what option do I have? This is decades of living and memories and items, and where do I even begin, right? So usually there's work that needs to be done prior to that. So it may not be the first thing. Sometimes it's the last thing that you do, but you don't have to do it alone. So if you've decided to sell, what I like for people to know, and even if this is not, a downsizing, this option is available for any seller. So this is what I call a convenience path, where it's an as-is or investor sale essentially. So we're not making a whole lot of improvement to the home. We're not necessarily staging and, the works, as I call it, the open house and things like that. Depending on health consideration, privacy considerations, and things like that, you could potentially sell the home as is, as an investor special, if you will. Now, the pro for that is obviously less time, less labor, less emotional bandwidth needed on the family. The trade-off is usually lower price, because you're marketing to a much smaller pool of buyers versus someone who can come in, and an end user, right, an owner-occupier, and can see themselves there. The other is to maximize the value, again, depending on what type of time and, emotional bandwidth that you have. We do the decluttering, the light improvements, staging, professional marketing, open house, the whole works. It does need time and energy, and depending on, again, I'll share with you some actual use cases in a few minutes. If you're managing this from a distance, or if you're close by and if you have the time, this could very well be worth it. Or maybe you're just, interested in just kind of closing this chapter. So there are options. And in some cases, in the convenience path, depending on how much stuff is in the home, we may even be able to market the home or negotiate that the investor actually removes what's remained at the home, right? I've done that with a few homes where the deal is, typically in New Jersey and many states, when a home is sold, it is sold in what's called broom ready, meaning we cannot have any items or furniture or anything in the home, right? But when it's an investor type of sale, we could ask, part of the negotiation is we don't really want to deal with removing these things, and you take it. And of course, the investors will consider that into their time and their offer, but there are some creative solutions like that as well. So here's what families underestimate typically is how much time it takes to sort belongings. I mean, we're talking about, and depending on how healthy mom and dad are, there might be memory issues. Again, I'll share with you a specific case where, one person passed and the other person has memory issues. They couldn't tell you what was important or not, or where things are, right? Yes, estate sales. We'll talk about that as well because that's going to be part of the team that we'll need depending on which path we take. And depending on also, if we think there's something, valuable in the home, right? So sorting belongings takes a lot of time. Vendor coordination, if we're going to do some improvements and things like that. The decision fatigue, again, we're already busy, right? We're working, we got families who are already tapped out. And so to have to manage another project is a lot. There could be unexpected delays, and I'll share with you again when I get to the case studies. Emotional pauses. So considering we're talking about a home where the adult children likely have been raised in, where they probably took their first steps in. There's a lot of memories, holidays, pictures, family visiting. I actually find that when we get to making the actual decision, it does get tough. And sometimes some of the adult children may pause, right? And may have an emotional reaction to it. I remember in one of the homes that I'll show you, as we're talking about staging and marketing, the adult who is about 40 at the time just was pausing at a fireplace where they used to gather for holidays and pictures, and he got really emotional, right? It hit him that the chapter is kind of turning. So it is quite an emotional process. Um, and also, are we marketing the home while our loved ones are still at the home? Because there's different considerations for that in terms of showings and availability and tours and health. Are they in a position where they can step out or an aide can help them step out for showings? Or are we marketing the home once they've moved on to their next accommodation, right? So these are all considerations. Um, Here's what you can do to prepare early, right? You can screenshot this if you want. You will have the recording as well. From a legal perspective, one of the first sessions that we had is a power of attorney, wills, estates, and things like that, healthcare proxy. Um, the power of attorney is really helpful to have while our loved ones are still healthy and they can do it. I am a notary public as well. And sometimes, unfortunately, I get asked to notarize documents where mom and dad are not with it. There's either a memory issue, they do not understand what they're signing. I cannot, in good conscience, notarize that document, right? Unfortunately, sometimes it's too late and things become complicated. So that's something you can do from a property perspective. Some of the things that could cause delays are open permits. You will be surprised, and this is across the board, regardless of generation or age. If you get work done that requires a permit, a lot of homeowners assume the contractor will close the permit. Fair assumption, right? But if you look at your agreement, a number of contractors will have in their agreement that the seller, I'm sorry, the owner in that case is to close out the permit. And sometimes these things pop up during a marketing period and they cause delays because now you're at the mercy of the town inspectors who are often way busy and very, thin on time to get to the closing table, which means, your buyer is going to be inconvenienced. It just causes unnecessary stress, right? So these are things that you can do now. You can do something called an OPRA request, Open Public Record Act request on the property and see if there's any, you can even just walk to the construction person of the town and see if there's any open permits and close those out. Tax status, sometimes if there's a senior freeze or a veteran freeze on the property tax, it's important to know that because we do have to market the home accurately and represent it well because we want the buyer to know that when they purchase it, the tax is going to change. This is the same if you've made renovations, by the way. Depending on when the renovation is made and when the tax assessor may assess the property. Unfortunately, sometimes I come across people who bought homes and all of a sudden their property taxes jumped unbeknownst to them because the tax that was published on the listing was before the assessment, right? So these are all liabilities that you need to consider. If the property has a survey or warranty on anything, appliances, roof, this is actually a secret weapon that I use for my clients because it really comes in handy when it comes during negotiations of inspection. Instead of having to repair something or replace something, if there's a warranty, particularly if it could be transferred to the buyer, boom, that's what we're doing, right? History condition of the home. So this is if mom and dad are not, if they don't remember or if we're helping them complete the disclosure. The state of New Jersey does now require a property or seller disclosure to be completed. It is several pages and all encompassing about HVAC and indoor and outdoor. I'm happy to send a version to you guys if that's helpful, so you see what it looks like. But again, it is important to accurately represent the home. And so knowing, yeah, some older adults are really, really meticulous. They have folders and I mean receipts and contractors and dates, and they really have it down, which is helpful. Um, Sometimes I come across people that I'm helping where usually it's once a loved one passes, um, they learn that there's a second or reverse mortgage on the property that they had not known about. And usually these things become due upon the person passing. And that can really impact what's going to happen with that property. And sometimes it causes foreclosures, right? Because they didn't know this thing exists. And so, as much as possible, trying to find out these things ahead of time could really help you come up with a stronger uh, plan. Again, any documentation that you have is helpful. POD is something that you can do, or the older adult can do at the bank. It's called payable on death, and this is for God forbid, loved ones pass. It's really, really difficult. Actually, I find that part of what makes the grief process really difficult while dealing with the loss of a loved one is all the bureaucracy and paperwork that we then have to deal with. And one of these things that we can remove earlier on is if they are in, good conscious, can go to the bank and say, upon my death, I allow this person to have access to the funds, or that person doesn't even have to know, if they don't feel comfortable. But that makes things a lot easier. You then just bring a death certificate and an ID, and that can really help move things along, because there's going to be costs associated with the selling of property, moving, right? Especially if we're doing the works, right? There may be staging or attorneys, and I'll talk about some of the team that you will need. So now we're on to E, execute with support. So what creates stress is waiting too long, that avoidant personality, right? Doing it alone. Unfortunately, if you're the only child or the only responsible one, you may not have, a lot of option, but you do have a bunch of professionals that you can lean on. You don't have to do it alone, right? Skipping planning, right? I'll deal with it when it comes. Family misalignment. And unfortunately, this actually causes a lot of family feud in my experience, right? Even when mom and dad are around, and particularly after their passing, a lot of family feud, particularly if there's no will or trust document, because everybody has their idea of what would be best for this asset, for this property. Underestimating the timeline. You cannot start early enough, right? Particularly if there's a lot of decluttering to do. You shouldn't do it alone. So your team involves a real estate professional. We're typically what I call a transition advisor, or really the project manager, right? So we're connected to a Connie, right, a senior advisor, a Megan, a home care person, and estate planning attorneys, financial advisors, junk removers, estate sales, even help you do garage sales. So we are resourceful. And if you find that you sort of got to the point that, okay, it's time to make some changes, but I don't know where to begin, please feel free to lean on us. And we can engage these professionals as needed. So here's the case study. These are actual families and homes. This is not theory. This is a home in Montclair, New Jersey. It has been in the same family for 46 years. Dad passed. This is a double lot, huge property, right? When I was marketing the home and I did an open house, the neighbors were telling me, I remember seeing mom and dad here sitting and reading a book, right? And helping the kids with soccer rides. So the adult kids, one was early 40s and one was late 30s, I believe. The 40s was the responsible one, and she was managing this from another West Coast state. So there's time differences and things like that. And, I met them. I was referred to this family about a year before we actually put the property on market for all the reasons that I mentioned. I remember this is the sidewalk, the driveway right here, y'all. I walked and went through the porch. The minute she saw me, it was her and her husband. She just bawled. She just cried because my physical presence meant something to her, right? This is the only home she's known. and her, younger life. And now it meant that the next chapter was coming. And I mean, it took a lot for her husband to kind of calm her down. And mom was upstairs, had memory issues, but still remember certain things. And I had to remove my name tag. I had to remove, the clipboard that I had. I was introduced as the daughter's friend so that I'm not triggering something from mom. This is really deep emotional stuff, y'all. And it took a while. Obviously, this is like a 6, 7 bedroom, Victorian that's been in the family for over 40 years. We needed time to help mom figure out, is she going to be in the West Coast? Is she going to be in New Jersey? Finding assisted living, going through this stuff. I mean, it was a lot of emotional stuff, pictures, right? They wanted to digitize some things. And so I was with them for about a year before we were ever ready to market the home. And they completed the disclosure the best they know how. They lived there their entire lives. And guess what came up? A tank, an underground tank. They had no reason to believe there was one because their entire lives they had gas, right, as fuel. But again, dad passed and mom, didn't remember. And so that added an unexpected delay in our timeline, even though we had done everything, early as possible. And so we got through it. And I mean, it got to a point, y'all, where I had to get a POA, a power of attorney from the daughter to be able to manage permit process because sometimes could be a little unhelpful, right? You're not the owner, you can't talk about this when the matter in fact is relevant to selling the home. I went as far as getting a POA and I'm like, I'm getting this done. This is what we're doing. She's not going to stress about this from the West Coast, and we got it done. This is a family in West Orange where when I was preparing for this workshop, actually, I was like, let me look up like when it was sold last before I sold it a few years ago. I couldn't find anything. I was like, maybe it was marketed like before the MLS, right? The digital world came up. So I texted the adult daughter, and I was like, when was it sold? And she was like, it wasn't. They built it. They built the home. They were the first owners. So what an honor, right, to help this family. These were sisters. They were both in New Jersey. Mom was still living there. And I have to say they were already aligned and included mom in all the decisions. She was still aware. She still knew what was happening. And we met with her and made sure she was comfortable with the plan. And we marketed the home while she was there. We came up with the plan of, okay, when there's showings, we blocked some things in the evenings and when she had OT and things like that. But she had an aide that would bring her outside of the home. And it was a pretty smooth project. We got it done. So I say this to say these are real homes, real families, real lives, and misalignment and not having support can cause a lot of emotional angst and maybe even money, right? And then alignment, on the other hand, could really be helpful. Any questions that come up for you, feel free to chat here. So planning changes outcomes. Planning changes outcomes. Without planning, you're going to feel stress, urgency, limited options, family feud, which is my least favorite thing. We often have to play therapist and navigate conversations with emotional intelligence because a lot comes during this time. With planning, you have a bit more control of the process and the outcome, better decisions, family alignment, you save your relationships and financial clarity and even higher returns, I will say. So what can you do this month? What are some practical things that you can do this month, right? So simple starting steps are have a conversation. Again, springtime or even summer when it's coming up, when you visit family, or maybe it's, if you feel like you may be fully healthy too, but you understand now that, the space is too big for you or it just doesn't serve your need anymore. Be honest about that. Have conversations and document the priorities, right? Is it important for me to just move on to the next thing as quickly as possible? Or am I willing to invest some time and energy to maximize the returns? Review finances, look at next steps, right? We talked about some options. Review legal documents and start decluttering slowly. I have an asterisk here because I do have resources perhaps that we can include in the follow-up. If you're in New Jersey, there are some organizations that will come and collect items from you, from your home. Some of them are really nice organizations. Things like furnishing a home for, folks who are maybe coming out of DV situations or something like that. So there's really helpful ways to do this. And then, what I can offer is to help you get started a planning conversation, a clarity conversation. So, what I offered so far is general information, but everybody's situation is different. And so, if you say, you know what you guys talked about today resonated with me, and I want to talk about this with my siblings or my parents, and I kind of need help aligning timelines or resources, I'm happy to do that. I just shared a link to secure that time, and I'm happy to share some of the resources as well. Um, so again, the goal isn't moving. The goal is making the next chapter easier. And hopefully, what I shared with you clarified some things for you and gave you some things you can kind of sink your teeth into to start having that tough conversation and put some things in the plan. At this point, I'm done with my presentation. I'll open up for questions, but I do want to share that we do have an upcoming, the next series, I guess the fifth one, right, will be on navigating the emotional side of caregiving because we know it's very emotional and takes a lot. Um, so that'll be on June 16th, and I believe we have the registration link here as well. Yeah, so at this point, thank you for joining. I hope that this was helpful. I promised you there wasn't going to be a sales pitch, and there was none, all information. And I'm going to open it up for questions. So feel free to unmute or come on camera. We won't bite.
Well, Taz, I want to say I found your information that you gave very helpful and informative. When we were starting this webinar this evening, I mentioned to you that I myself am thinking of downsizing, that I'm 99% there. I got like my husband, 98% there, 2 more percent, and we'll be ready to do something. And, part of that decision is what's next.
Mm,
So just listening to what you're saying, I said, okay, I want to do that this year. And now that I've heard all your pieces of what you said needs to be done, I'm like, okay, can I get that done this year? It's already March.
right, right.
It's already March. Can I get it all done? But it's very informative and it's making me think that I need to get moving because what you said is that I believe I've underestimated
The time.
the time,
Mhm.
and we are the first owners of this house. We did build it, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that we need to just get rid of, and I think I need to start doing that. But
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you found it helpful. And especially if anybody has like an attic or a basement, I mean, you have stuff and you have plenty of closets, we're going to find a way to fill it, right? And it's really, it takes a lot of time and emotion to care for each and every item that we decided to bring into the home. We now have to make decisions on them, right? And so the earlier you start there, then you can actually believe that, you know what, I can do this. This is manageable enough. And you can do garage sales as well. I actually have a whole guide on how to do garage sales. The home that on the right that I showed, the two sisters, they actually used my guide and they did a garage sale and it was great as well. But yeah, I'm glad you got something out of it.
I don't know if I would do a garage sale because that's work. And part of my reason of downsizing is I'm tired of work.
Sometimes we do it strategically, like after marketing the home, because it could also spark some interest and people, will come in and take a look. It's also just a great way to meet people. But yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So the main thing I know is I need to get started now.
Yeah. Yep. Mhm. What questions does the group have? Was there something in here that you hadn't considered that you found helpful? Or was there something that you wanted to hear about that wasn't covered?
I have a question.
Hmm.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
So I guess my question is because I'd say I'm on the brink of the sandwich generation, and we have our parents, we've had our parents' siblings who have passed, and we've kind of seen some of the shenanigans that have kind of erupted within families around that. And I find myself not just thinking about my parents, but also like the kids. And like, I don't want to leave my kids dealing with any of these shenanigans. And so I think I'm already thinking about, all right, what can we start to do now? One, because we have no idea when our time's coming. And two, because I don't want to get to 70 and then be trying to like figure out all the things. And so I guess I think about that part of it too. Like, what can I start to do or be mindful of that sets me up so that some of this doesn't feel so overwhelming when I need to really intentionally move with some of the things you're talking about as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So there's actually something called Swedish death, right? Where people in preparation for their passing, give really minimize, right? Because they don't want that burden, that emotional burden for their children. Locally, we have buy nothing movement, which is helpful in getting rid of things. But I think one of the best advice that I've got when I was working with an organizer a few years ago, because my kids' room was just overwhelming, is like, for every item that you choose to bring, like know that you're responsible for managing it throughout the life cycle of that item. Anytime you see it, you have to move it, you have to clean it, you got to push it back and forth. So are you willing to assume that? Anytime you feel like you found something on sale and it's great, think about the management piece, right? Because clutter also makes us, I know, like anxiety, like when things are cluttered versus when my cleaner is here. It's different. I used to actually feel guilty about having a cleaner. And then I realized it's actually a mental health benefit, honestly. I feel better. I can think clearer, right, when the home is cleaner. And so that perspective has helped me a lot, Karima. And um, yeah, so there's, things like buy nothing groups for those, who are on Facebook and you can do garage sales, just purge every quarter for those who have kids. So one thing I do is when the season changes, I look through things and see if they don't fit anything, I just get rid of them or, hand me down to family and stuff like that so that I don't have the attic or the garage to then, because what we're doing is we're just delaying decision. At some point, we have to decide, and then it becomes this overwhelming thing that actually holds us hostage. Like I said, there's people who know they need to move, but the thing that's holding them hostage is like, how do I even begin? Like, where do I start? Right? So yeah, so there's such movements as well, but I appreciate that perspective. Yes, there's short trust said there's a veteran organization that comes and picks up donations. Yeah, I believe that's Pick Up Please is one of them. And they have a list of things that I see them all the time in my community. I think they were even here today. Usually when in my town, I organize something called a Purge Fest twice a year, which is families go through their entire homes and they put up essentially free garage sales. And it's pretty fun. Like we have the locations and pinned and, neighbors are driving by, meeting each other, talking. And when they're done, I don't want them to bring the stuff back if everything is not taken. And so I ask them to schedule something with Pickup Please. So it's all out of their home, right? So there's movements like that as well. Any other questions? Was this helpful at all? It's a quiet group today.
Extremely helpful. Extremely helpful.
Oh, I'm so
Yes, it
glad.
was.
I like your
Yes,
I
it
like
was
your
extremely
care.
helpful. You touched on a lot of things that hit home for me in particular. I'm the daughter with the widowed mom,
Okay.
an only child of a widowed only child. So we've gone through a little bit of the process. My mother is renting when she became unable to live alone anymore.
Mhm.
But I'm still her caregiver, even though she doesn't physically live under my roof.
Yeah.
Um, and my husband and I are both retired and thinking about relocating, but two things, when and where.
Yeah.
So we haven't narrowed that down yet. We're not in alignment right now. He'd like to go down to Delaware where everything is supposedly
Tax free.
financially
Yeah.
friendly and
Mhm.
tax friendly and all that good stuff. But
Mhm.
who do we know in Delaware?
Mhm.
What's in that area? Where are my kids? We have three kids. Where are they going to be? Even though they're adults, I still would like to be in close proximity to them if possible. So we're still working at trying to pull it all together. But I think the first piece, as you said, where do you start?
Yeah.
And I know where we need to start is having those grown kids who have their own place come and get their stuff
Yes.
out of my house that's still here. For
Yes.
some reason, they don't live here,
Yes.
but the mail and their stuff
Yes.
still finds their way here. So
Yeah.
just it was very helpful. Thank you so much. This
I'm
entire series has been very helpful.
I'm so glad that you find it helpful. So a few things that I'll chime on because I actually had clients who had like some of the kids had launched, some of them were in college and they didn't know where they were going to land, right? But they were ready. They were ready to go
Mhm.
to Delaware actually. Because of, tax friendly, I guess income tax and all that good stuff. But they didn't know that the last child was like one of those free birds, right? He could be in Australia one day and in Brooklyn the next. So they're like, we don't know where you're going to land. And so they decided to, actually, they ended up in PA. Um, for them, the logic was a lot of their friends was in Jersey. But it didn't have to be like a 20-minute drive. They felt like if it was someone's birthday or whatever, it's still like roughly an hour drive or whatever it is, right? So it's still reasonable. One of the kids, I think, was in DC as well. So they felt like it's somewhat midway, right? And one was going to Connecticut or whatever. So, they thought about it and it's hard to come up with an exact location that meets everything. And at some point you have to make a
Right.
decision. And as much as, we love our kids and want them to be close, listen, at some point we have to make a decision that makes sense for us and they'll navigate around it.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
You know?
I realize that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I'm glad Florence and Short Dress, you found it helpful. I thought when y'all were quiet, I'm like, damn, did I like silence them? Is this heavy?
Well, when you cover a subject and you do it extremely well, Tez, it doesn't leave a lot of questions because
Mhm.
you've gone through every nook and cranny, and
Mhm,
and I think that's why people don't have a lot of questions because you were very thorough,
mhm. I hope
extremely
so.
thorough.
That
Mhm.
I hope so. Yeah. Yeah, well, if there's no more questions, we have shared the link to the next session, and our speaker is actually Karima, who's with us. She asked the first question, and so I'm looking forward to that. Anything? Hi, Doc. I think it's such an important topic because we can talk about the logistics, we can talk about the tangibles, right? Selling home marketing, but the emotional. It is a lot to unpack in general for any individual who's only responsible for themselves, much less, a family and dealing with two different generations. And so I'm looking forward to that session. And if it, we'll do some follow-ups as well. We'll usually, send some highlights in the recording from this. So if you found it so helpful, but someone else wasn't able to join, feel free to share it with them. We're always happy to be a resource, and we truly are. I really mean this honestly. Connie, myself, and Megan. I think it's a special collection, to be honest with you, because I know I don't like to be sold anything. I don't like cold calls. I don't like people selling me on their things. And we really come from a place of contribution and knowledge and resource. And we're very generous with our time and resources. And I hope you feel that because that's the only way, right? That's the only way to add value and maintain relationships. So feel free, if you go back and have conversations with your family and you're stuck and you need a clarity call, I'm pretty good at that. I'm happy to give you 15 minutes of my time and thank you for joining us. Anything else that I may have forgotten? Connie and Megan, are we good?
No, do we give the date for the next one?
Yes, I thought it did. Sorry, it is
June
June
6th?
16th, right?
Yes.
June 16th, 7 p.m. Yeah, we
7.
always do it 7 p.m. so it's convenient for families maybe after dinner or you can even listen during dinner. And again, this is often we heard about the dynamics. It's either the one responsible person, right? And maybe there's misalignment. So feel free to share it with people. It is virtual. Anybody can join regardless of where they are in the nation or even globally. Some people have left the damn country. So feel free to share it with them as well. So we look forward to that. Thank you for joining us. And with that, have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.